Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session. Today, at this session, we will speak about plastics. Plastics is a very, very well investigated topic, both in terms of its technical properties, but also a lot about its environmental consequences. However, most of the things we hear about plastics are related to plastic waste, like pollution related to plastic or marine pollution from plastics. This session is designed a little bit differently because we intend to speak more about upstream measures to make plastics more circular and more sustainable. This is a slide just to set the scene. Plastics is a problem mainly because of its scale. Here you can see the amount of plastics we have put out there in the world compared to the total weight of animals living in the world. So plastic is a problem mainly because of its scale. So today we've put together a panel, some presentations that will address this issue mainly from the upstream side of things. The first part will be a selection of scene-setting interventions, 3 of those, and then we move to part 2 where we will be a little bit more specific about what is it that we can do specifically to deal with the problems we face around plastics. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Tobias Nielsen from the European Environment Agency. Welcome, Tobias.
Thank you very much. So, let me see. Yeah. As Janis just pointed out, the plastic debates have for a long time been focusing on pollution, on downstream measures, on the end of life of plastics. The plastic treaty, which is being negotiated at this very moment, is calling for an end to plastic pollution. But we, and the UN Treaty, of course, as well, need to think about plastics across the whole life cycle. Because if you don't, we risk overlooking some of the challenges that we face with plastics further upstream. If you look at extraction and production, for example, we see that this emits a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. Around 3 to 4% of the global greenhouse gas emissions attributed to plastics. The same, we can see another key issue is about the lock-in. So we can see around 8% of all the oil and gas that we use, that we consume, are consumed for plastics. And furthermore, we can see the oil and gas industry are really looking to plastics as a future driver of growth. So as our demand for oil and gas in transport sector or in power generation sort of decreases, the plastic or the oil and gas sector is really looking to oil and gas as the future. So in a lot of ways, plastic is the future for the petrochemical sector. We can also see a lot of oil and gas sector diversifying into petrochemicals. So for example, SABIC, one of the largest petrochemical companies, merged with Saudi Aramco a few years ago, one of the largest oil and gas producers. So there's a huge locking there building up. If we look further downstream at use, we see that we sort of are exposed, or we get into our bodies around 100,000 microplastic particles every year through breathing in, through ingestion, and so forth. And in those countries that are very dependent on water bottles as their main water consumption, that figure doubles. There was a recent study that found that microplastics in the blood of 80% of the people they tested. Another issue is PFAS, which is really gaining a lot of political awareness, and there's several countries around Europe which are really trying to ban PFAS because they last forever and they're toxic. And one of the key exposure routes of PFAS, entering our system, entering our bodies, is through synthetic textiles, which is again plastics. So the number of chemicals that are used in plastics is far outreaching our ability to monitor their effects. So there's hundreds of thousands of chemicals out there used in plastics, and we really only know the risks of tens of thousands of those. So I think Janis did a great job of illustrating the downstream. We know this story. We know, the magnitude it's colossal, the amount of plastic pollutions we're delivering. But again, if we want, we can't focus only on downstream. We can't focus only on cleaning this up. We really need to look further upstream and turning off the tap of plastic pollution. Another reason to look further upstream is this is where the biggest impacts are. So you can see from this quote, product design takes up to 80% of its life cycle environmental impact. So the materials we use, is this virgin fossil feedstocks? Is it recycled material? Is it renewable materials? The design of the product, is this a reusable product? Is this a recyclable product? All these design choices really have a huge impact on the environmental impacts of plastic products. So upstream measures are absolutely key. In a report we published recently, we looked at different pathways. So these are groups of solutions for the plastic challenges that I outlined earlier. And we looked for specific examples for these all across Europe. And we found that upstreams are key for all these different pathways. So if you look at the first one, it's about smarter use. So that's really essentially about rethinking the use of plastics. So reducing the unnecessary use of plastics, for example, the Single-Use Plastic Directive. It's also about redesigning plastic products so that we're able to repair the products instead of just throwing them away when they break. And it's also about sharing. So in libraries, in some libraries in Finland, you can rent books, of course, but you can also rent items like sewing machines or tools. So these plastic-containing products can then be shared amongst different people instead of all these people have to owning these things individually. For increased circularity, this is, of course, a lot about making the whole collection and recycling systems work better, but also there we can see design and upstream measures are crucial for the reasons that I just talked about before, the importance of products being designed for circularity. When we look at the last one, renewable materials, this is really about decoupling away from fossil fuel feedstocks, about reducing the greenhouse gas emissions from plastics. And this is, of course, by its very definition, an upstream activity. And of course, the feedstocks that we use here have to have a lower environmental footprint than fossil fuels and also not compete with feed and food. The last thing that I would just want to point out is monitoring. So the data. We need to better understand and better monitor the upstream activities. We know more and more about what's happening downstream with recycling, collection, sorting, and so on, but we need to be better familiar or know more about what's happening upstream. So at the EEA, we're designing something called the Circularity Metrics Lab, which is sort of a set of indicators that can tell us something about the state of circularity in Europe. And we're using this framework to zoom in on plastics, and we're developing a set of around 10 indicators to begin with that can help us understand the state of circularity for plastics. And there we're seeing there's a lot more indicators downstream than upstream. One of the indicators that we could potentially use to monitor upstream activities is this one, is the the circular material use rate. So how much of recycled plastics are we using? And that's the bottom one, it's the fossil fuels, which is essentially plastics. And we can see that this is recycled, or we use a lot less recycled material for plastics than other materials, and also that the trend is not really, it's rather flat. So that tells us that there's few indicators, and the indicators that we do have say that we really need to scale up upstream activities. And the last thing I just want to, so just to sum up before I end my talk, is that we need to look upstream to get a fuller picture of all the challenges of plastics. And we need to look upstream because upstream is where the biggest impacts are on changing the plastic systems. But we need more data and a better understanding of upstream activities. And this is one of the aims of the session today. So thank you very much.
Thanks to Tobias, really, really interesting stuff. And I think we can all agree that circular economy is about tracking things a bit more upstream than only dealing with post-consumer stages of the life cycle. Now, we're going to talk about collaboration, public and private collaboration. And for that, I would like to invite Roisin Green from the Global Plastic Action Partnership to speak to us about this topic. Roisin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks. I'll pop here. Great. Thank you, Yannis. Also, thank you to Finland and Sitra for hosting this fantastic event and welcoming us to this absolutely beautiful city. And Tobias, thanks for doing such a great job setting the scene so well. I think the pathways clearly are providing solutions, and I'm really looking forward to the panel later and getting to hear some real-life examples of what this could look like. So like some of you here today, I've just arrived in from INC2 in Paris. And I think what struck me most during the last few days is the clear level of ambition. I know it's a little bit cliched to say, but there really is a palpable energy in Paris that we can do something on this matter. And one speaker even suggested that INC could mean impossible not to be committed. So in preparing for today, I've thought about the top 4 things that struck me over my couple of days in Paris. Number 1 is the recognition that we are in a diplomatic sprint. There's a shared understanding that there's no time to waste. Number 2, there's a clearly communicated need for redesign of the whole system. Reduction is an essential part of the suite of solutions, as is scaling up reuse business models. 3, the treaty must be inclusive. This means bringing diverse voices to the table during the negotiations process and ensuring that the outcomes of the treaty are just and inclusive, because the risk of unintended consequences is just too high. So why does the treaty matter for upstream solutions, and what options are proposed within the treaty elements? I've mentioned we need to redesign the entire system. So focusing on downstream or midstream solutions alone just cannot solve the problem. UNEP's recently published report, Turning Off the Tap, provides evidence of the essential need for upstream solutions. Systems modeling shows us that reuse schemes have the potential to reduce the consumption of plastic from short-lived products by 30% by 2040. So it's a considerable amount just for reuse solutions. Now, we know there's no single silver bullet. We won't recycle our way out of this problem. We won't ban our way out of this problem. What we need are a simultaneous, coordinated action across the entire plastics life cycle. We need a combination of upstream, midstream, and downstream measures to trigger real systems change. So, more tangibly, what options will the negotiators be considering as potential upstream solutions? An incremental rising tax or fee on the purchase of virgin plastic feedstock by manufacturers of plastic packaging and plastic-containing products, a prohibition of products containing problematic or unnecessary plastic, control measures on chemicals of concern, obligation to replace plastic if safe and more sustainable alternatives exist, and fiscal policy incentives for companies shifting their operations to circular plastics. So clearly there are a number of potential policies levers available, but also why is it imperative to include the private sector in discussions on upstream measures? The most obvious answer is the private sector will be directly impacted by the upstream measures, but also the private sector are able to provide key insights on potential solutions, feasibility, implications, as ultimately they're the ones who are closest to what's happening in practice. So I lead the Global Plastic Action Partnership at the World Economic Forum, and we create an impartial space for multi-stakeholder convening. We facilitate dialogues that bring together different perspectives, including governments, private sector, and civil society. We believe this is important to support productive negotiations, and importantly also to look ahead and start planning for potential implementation scenarios. So in addition to our focus on multi-stakeholder convening, The forum is also developing case studies on how potential treaty options are already being implemented by companies across the plastics value chain. So the aim of this project is to help companies adapt and transition to a circular plastic economy as we come closer to the final version of the agreement. This will include insights on which of the suggested solutions are particularly challenging to implement, and barriers and potential collaboration models to consider to advance solutions. Now, also, I cannot speak about private sector action without referencing the great work of our friends at the Business Coalition for a Global Plastics Treaty, led by WWF and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. This is another excellent example of an initiative engaging the private sector in deeper discussions on upstream measures. We work very, very closely with the Business Coalition, and we're so grateful to have them as a partner. One of the other things we hear time and again in the discussion regarding scaling upstream solutions is the importance of financing. In addition to policy, financing is another essential lever to encourage upstream redesign. And we're seeing an ever-growing opportunity for financial institutions in this space. Innovators, entrepreneurs, including those at the vanguard of upstream product design and materials innovation, need access to financing to scale. Bilateral and multilateral assistance, as well as impact investors, can play a role in providing catalytic capital and off-taking risk. We also need policies to support a cohesive ecosystem for plastic circularity, including those that address upstream measures. For example, this could look like incentives for companies to design products for circularity, or mandating content standards, such as minimum recycled content. One thing is very, very clear. For investment to flow upstream in the plastics value chain, there needs to be transparent, equitable, and predictable policies in place. We already see success stories and examples of forward-thinking companies and investors who look at the opportunities, not just the challenges. So a few years ago, France implemented an anti-waste law, which incentivized reuse and refill models. This created a market and an opportunity for growth. And then European startups like Pixo and Vital have reaped the benefits of this development. It helped them secure essential early investment in their reusable container business models. And I know we're going to hear about some reusable business models later as well. So if you'd like to learn more about this example, we've analyzed at the World Economic Forum and developed case studies showcasing how investment can unlock the circular plastics economy. Another great resource that I'd encourage you to review is the response paper from UNEP-FI's Finance Leadership Group on Plastics. This group brings together a leading group of financial institutions and shares their response to the options paper as a part of the INC process. In this paper, they call for an internationally legally binding instrument that enables the alignment of all financial flows to solutions that end plastic pollution across the value chain, including both indirect and direct subsidies. If you're interested in finance, I'd recommend it. It's definitely worth a read. So there's a big opportunity for the forthcoming treaty to catalyze financing upstream, and there's growing momentum and appetite from lots of different stakeholders. Now let me take the opportunity to share a little bit more about what we at the Global Action Partnership and how we're embedding upstream action into our work. So I've spoken about the role of policymakers, the role of the private sector, the role of financing. And what strikes me when I discuss this topic is the importance of the role of collaboration. And now collaboration, it's very easy to say. It can be a little bit difficult in practice for anyone who's tried. And the reason is it takes trust. And that's why at the Global Plastic Action Partnership, we've created a multi-stakeholder platform that brings together various leaders, including governments, business, civil society, and local communities. And we do this at both global and national levels. So at a national level, we support the creation of national plastic action partnerships. We have the ambition to support 25 countries by 2025. And personally, I'm so proud of this work and this vibrant network of countries that we have the opportunity to support. The national plastic action partnerships place strong emphasis on assessing the impact of upstream measures, including reuse business models, through its national analysis and modeling tool. So this is a unique methodology that provides baselines of the national plastics value chain and develops scenarios for the next 20 years. And by bringing together diverse perspectives and expertise, we develop comprehensive strategies that incorporate reuse and upstream models as key elements of national roadmaps. And what we're finding through the development of the national roadmaps is that although reuse models are sometimes considered as a midstream measure, their successful implementation has positive effects across the value chain. For example, reuse models can reduce upstream feedstock use and then downstream pressure on waste management systems. In addition to our national action plans, the Global Plastic Action Partnership worked with the plastic value chain in Colombia. And together with national stakeholders, we developed the Colombia Reuse Outlook, a first-of-its-kind report assessing the local context and the enabling conditions to scale implementation of reuse models in that country. And that's something we would love to do and to partner with other countries to deliver. And then at a global level, the World Economic Forum, together with UNEP and WWF, recently launched the Reuse Portal. This is an open, collaborative platform. It is designed to use by innovators, businesses, policymakers, activists, consumers, and citizens. And the Reuse Portal provides users with convenient access to practical guidance, tools, and networks to take action and drive momentum for reuse solutions. You can find it at www.reuseportal.org, and apologies for my shameless plug there, but it really is a great resource for anyone who's interested in reuse and working in this space. So governments, business, civil society, you're not alone in this journey. Collaboration's important, and the World Economic Forum, the Global Plastic Action Partnership, we're here, we're ready to support, to redesign the system, and to end plastic pollution. And then finally, I forgot my fourth final reflection from INC in Paris, and that's I really came away with a great sense of optimism. And what if INC can really show us impossible not to be committed? Thanks.
Thanks a lot to Roising for bringing us the latest from the negotiations in Paris, but also for outlining some opportunities and challenges in upstream action. I particularly like the examples that are actually working, are in place. There's a lot of them, and yeah, thanks a lot for bringing this up, Roising. The next scene-setting intervention is from people that are not present in the room. So we have a video from some business leaders speaking to the Consumer Goods Forum. So I think it's interesting to hear what they have to say. So.
A legally binding UN treaty is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to end the plastic pollution crisis in a globally coordinated way. It is the single most important catalyst to accelerate progress towards a global circular economy for plastics.
Since 2020, the Plastic Waste Coalition members of the CGF have been working to drive voluntary action to tackle plastic waste and pollution. Together, we have endorsed the vision statement of the Business Coalition for a Global Plastic Treaty, convened by WWF and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation.
Following 3 years of collaboration, the Plastic Waste Coalition has developed leading industry initiatives to accelerate progress towards a circular economy. We hope these initiatives can also contribute to treaty negotiations.
We have developed 9 golden design rules for plastic packaging that are already making an impact. A unified treaty provides an opportunity to harmonize packaging design guidelines globally for the whole consumer goods industry.
The Golden Design Rules are an accessible way for companies and national organizations to support design changes that help ensure plastic packaging never becomes waste and can be more easily recycled.
If fully implemented, the CGF Golden Design Rules reduce unnecessary plastic, eliminate problematic elements in packaging, and create high-value recycling.
In 2020, the CGF Plastic Waste Coalition endorsed a joint position on optimal extended producer responsibility for packaging. A successful EPR system includes improved waste management and recycling systems.
We want to encourage the development of efficient, cost-effective and transparent EPR schemes for packaging across the globe. We have therefore published principles and parameters to serve as a starting point for productive multi-stakeholder engagement and dialogue.
We need a system-wide transformation that prevents plastic waste from being created in the first place and moves us to a circular economy for plastics. One in which all steps of the value chain are addressed to eliminate waste and pollution.
We want to see an ambitious and effective treaty, one that builds on and accelerates voluntary industry action and helps to bring all businesses around the world on the same journey towards circularity. We are committed to working with governments to ensure a high ambition in the treaty negotiations.
Thanks a lot. And with that video, the first part of today's session is concluded. Thanks a lot to our two presenters that helped us, paint the broad picture of upstream actions for plastic, to make them more circular. Now it's time to dive a little bit more into the detail. So I am very pleased to invite our panelists for the second part of this session that are going to speak to us about specific aspects on how to make plastic production greener, how to implement reuse better, and how to reflect upon the social aspects related to plastic. So our four panelists, please join me here on the stage. Paul Collins from Huhtamäki, excuse my accent maybe. Then it's Iita Miettinen from Camupac. Hi, Iita.
Hello.
Manon Seneschal from Planet Reuse.
Hi.
And last but definitely not least, Melati Weisen from Youthtopia.
Hi.
Thanks a lot to all of you for coming. Now we're going to hear some interventions from each of the panelists, and then we'll have a short discussion with them. So first, I would like to invite on the floor Paul. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's really great to be here this afternoon, and your pronunciation, I think, is probably better than mine, so it's okay. 25 years ago, it's hard to believe, 25 years ago, I started on a journey with a PhD in plastics. And that journey has taken me from the early days of developing angioplasty balloons for heart attack patients to developing wings for commercial aircraft to working for a food and beverage company in their packaging R&D function to today working for Huhtamäki. Huhtamäki, if you don't know of us, our ambition is to be the first choice in sustainable packaging solutions globally. We've been around for over 100 years. We have manufacturing facilities, over 80 manufacturing facilities in 35 countries with 20,000 employees. We have three main segments. We have fiber food service, flexible packaging, and North America, which is a segment of its own. And what I'd like to do is to leave three points with you today. It's easy to remember three things. The title of this segment is How Can We Change from Virgin Fossil Feedstock? And there are three ways that we have been attempting to make an impact and to make a difference. And the first way is that we need to drive change in collection, sorting, and recycling of flexibles. The second thing that we need to do is we need to see sustainability and innovation working hand in hand to drive systemic change. And the last thing is we need access to affordable, high-quality materials that are compatible with contact-sensitive and food contact applications. If you had the opportunity perhaps to go to Interpack a few weeks ago, you would have seen our Blue Loop innovation. Blue Loop is a segment-wide sustainability brand. And there we launched and we showcased our PE, our mono PE structure, our PP retort, and our flexible paper solutions. And what we've really tried to do from an R&D perspective, and it's been mentioned by Tobias, it's been mentioned by some of the CEOs on the big screen, is that we've tried to design for circularity and to decomplexify some of the more traditional complex structures that have existed. But we need to be really sensitive to the fact that as a business within our flexible segment, a large portion of our segment requires contact-sensitive structures. So we can't use mechanically recycled content. We have to use either today virgin or chemically recycled. And I'll just recap, and I'm just going to finish because I can see that time is almost up. The 3 points that I want to make: that we need to have joined up collection, sorting, and recycling. We need sustainability and innovation to go hand in hand and design out some of the complex structures, increase and maximize the monomaterials. And lastly, the third point is we need access to affordable. Affordability is key. In order to move away from virgin fossil feedstock, we need to be able to afford to be competitive. We need to have affordable, high quality, food contact compatible recyclate. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for outlining for us the 3 main conditions, according to you, for greening the feedstock. That's, of course, probably one of the most important things to do upstream-wise. Yeah? But the next 2 interventions have to do with reuse. And the first one to speak to us about that is Ida Miettinen from Camupac. Ida, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Wow, super excited to be here today, and what a great 2 days we have had so far here. We at Camupac exist because we want to bring one of the solutions to the global waste crisis. And how we do that is that we enable reusability with the help of digitality. We have built a digital deposit and borrow model for reusable takeaway packaging. And our system is in use among our customers who are restaurants, cafes, and hotels, and we're well partnered up with home delivery platforms and also wholesalers nowadays. And why we use digitality, and why I believe digitality is really crucial in order to make reusability scalable. It allows us to have real-time tracking of where all the packaging are so that we can actually make it scalable in that sense. And it also makes it easy for the consumers, meaning that they can return the reused packaging to any restaurant, regardless where they picked it up from. And we can utilize the digital tools for consumers and companies. And even more important is that we can also track the environmental impacts of reuse once we know how many rotation each package has done and where they are. So it's really crucial in reusability. And why then again reusability is sustainable and why it's the way to go in the future. We will definitely need recycling, and we will definitely need bio-based packaging materials. But that itself is not enough. As we know, the packaging market and the packaging waste problem is ever growing, and it's blooming, unfortunately, at the moment. And the only tool actually to lower the amount of packaging waste is to move rapidly into reuse. And also, as an example, according to our life cycle assessments, when one package reaches 100 loops, they can end up, that certain package can end up saving up to 6 to 8 kilos of packaging waste. And that is what makes reusability interesting. And also, currently, now that we know that we need to make reusability the norm of everyday life, and we really need to go faster with this, we have learned at Camupac also that we will need regulatory environments, and we will need financial incentives for the market to emerge. And why so is that in order for the reusable market to actually emerge, it needs to be also financially appealing for companies, because we really do need ecosystems, and we do need all the companies on board. No consumer is not going to change the market. Consumers are not going to change the market themselves, and neither is one company. So that's why I'm also super happy that the Commission is taking the road towards reusability, and now I'm hopeful that countries itself will move more towards regulatory environments and that the incentives will be there. For an example, in Finland, our waste system is more or less still supporting single use. So there's barriers on the way, and it might sound complex, but it's not really complex. We just need to decide that we want to move into reuse, then we'll remove the barriers, and then we'll make the incentives there. And we have us, and we have other reusable players in the markets, and we are here to apply reusability into everyday lives and to lower the amount of packaging waste.
Thank you, Ida. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for reminding us also on the environmental benefits from reuse. On the same topic, staying on that, Manon, you also have an intervention to make. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eunice. Thank you for having me, and thank you. Hello, everyone. Building on top of what Ida just said, reusable packaging solutions like Camupack are emerging throughout the world. And at Enough Plastic, these last 5 years, we've been aggregating these solutions worldwide, seeing them grow and seeing them gain traction from consumers, from businesses, and more recently from a legal perspective. As Raisin also mentioned, at EU level with the packaging and packaging waste regulation discussions, but also on the international scale with the plastics treaty negotiations. In line with the different keynote speakers' interventions, it's become clear that we can no longer only recycle our way out of the single-use packaging waste crisis. It's obvious we need to move upstream in the value chain by complementing current recycling efforts with prevention and reuse systems, because these solutions are the ones offering the highest mitigation opportunities by significantly reducing CO2 emissions, cutting on energy, water, resource use, as Ida just shared with Camupack, but more overall drastically reducing pollution and waste. But if this transition were easy, it would have already been adopted. So we've seen that some brands have started their upstream journeys through reuse pilots, through the shift from single-use plastic packaging to fiber-based single-use packaging, for example. But most of them faced common challenges, be it a lack of human and financial resources to identify, design, and adopt the best solutions within their operations. They would also face a lack of strong legal incentives, and above all, a first-mover risk when moving alone. So that's the reason why at Enough Plastic, but with several partners around the world, we've been developing tools to support corporates in their linear to circular transition, shifting their distribution models towards more circularity and reusability. And Planet Reuse is a great example of these tools in Europe. To share a few words on Planet Reuse, it's the first online European platform and network bringing all stakeholders in the field of reuse and reusable packaging to learn, connect, and collaborate on the topic. It's a very powerful tool because it enables these reuse stakeholders to stay updated on current developments in the field through webinars that we're organizing on very specific topics on the reuse value chain, like standardization, reverse logistics, efficiency, how to develop protocols and standards for cleaning practices, for example. These stakeholders also access a pool of very rich resources on the topic. The idea is not to reinvent the wheel. A lot of resources are already out there, so this platform centralizes them. And above all, to connect with the right partners to move this reuse transition forward. The platform was created in September last year. Already, has reached almost 600 members in 30 countries in Europe. It features 4 national hubs, which gathers stakeholders working on the topic nationally. And our objective in the coming years is to expand its action and reach in all parts of Europe. Because what Planet Reuse has proved is that multi-stakeholder collaboration is a key aspect to bringing successful reuse systems forward. And I also believe, and that's my conclusion also for today, that without, for reuse system to strongly take off the ground, we need strong political momentum and incentives. And we need a strong legal framework pushing upstream as an accelerator towards true circularity. And that's one of the reasons that with Planet Reuse and New Era, which is the political voice of reuse systems in Europe, we've structured a reuse campaign that will be live and official next week in Brussels for the Green Week, to reinforce to policymakers the need to set ambitious reuse targets in the law and to reinforce the fact that reuse systems are highly beneficial from an environmental, economic, and social perspective. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Manon, for outlining your initiatives, which sound really interesting, and also reminding us that we cannot only recycle our way out of the problem. Yeah? I think youth has been the leitmotif of this forum also. I mean, we had a big, very interesting session yesterday, and we're proud to have today with us Melati, that both belongs and represents youth in a way. She's the founder of Youthtopia, but also a really cool name, which is Bye Bye Plastic Bags. Melati, the floor is yours.
Amazing. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Melati. I'm 22 years old and a full-time change maker. First of all, we are the session after lunch, so thank you for being here. And secondly, Paul mentioned that he was going to share 3 points because 3 points is easy to remember. But after 3 incredible speakers, I want to interact with you and make sure I'm giving you the break to digest all the incredible new knowledge and information. So sit a little straighter, roll your shoulders back, and on the count of 3, take a deep breath. 1, 2, 3. Take a deep breath in and out. Take another deep breath in and out. I like to do this on all of the stages I go to, whether it's a classroom at the United Nations or here in Helsinki with you, mainly because it's a good way to calm the butterflies in my stomach. But the second reason is the real reason why I do it, and it's a strong reminder that 70% of the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean. Every second breath comes from the ocean. So when we are at conferences like this, panels and in buildings and rooms, it's really important to bring back the reason why we are doing this, to protect and preserve and to put priority on our beautiful planet home. My change-making journey started at the age of 12 years old. So this year marks the 10 years of being at the front lines of change. And the 2 examples that I share with you during my 3 to 5 minute intervention today is one on the topic of education and the importance that change can start in the classroom. And the second is on a social enterprise I started when I was 17 called Mountain Mamas. I'll start off with this because it's a clear example of a social enterprise working in harmony with the circular model in mind. Mountain Mamas, well, first off, we started an organization at 10 and 12 years old called Bye Bye Plastic Bags. And the mission is in the name. We wanted our island home of Bali to be free of plastic bags. Now, we thought we'd be done by the time summer was over and the school year started, but that was 10 and 12-year-old naive thinking, the spider web we entered ourselves into, of which one was, well, if you want us to say bye-bye to plastic bags, what is the alternative? Now, we didn't want to get into the business entirely of alternative bag making, but we did see an opportunity to connect an alternative bag project with empowering women in the mountains of Bali. So that is what Mountain Mamas is all about. We have a in the mountains of Bali, and we work with fashion brands, but also hotels that give us their pre-loved materials, so old bed sheets, old offcuts of the factories, and we turn them into alternative bags. Each woman comes in at their own time, at their own pace, whenever they have the time and the energy to come into the workshop. They make a bag and they get paid for the bags that they make. So if one woman comes in and makes 5 bags, they get paid for 5 bags. If another makes 10 bags, they get paid for 10 bags. And then the good news is we don't just stop there. These bags get sold across retailers on the island, and 50% of the sales profit goes back to Bye Bye Plastic Bags as the NGO, and 50% of the sales profit goes back to the community where the women are from, and that gets put into a budget for things like waste management, healthcare, and education. In that way, the circle comes round, and we see not only are we putting the environment forward, but we're showing that business models like this actually do work. Education, last thing I'll say before I throw it back and join these incredible speakers. As a 22-year-old young changemaker, starting at 12 years old, we knew early on the power of knowledge. If we don't know the problem, if we can't understand it, how can we be part of the solution? So Bye Bye Plastic Bags has created an educational booklet. This one is our 3rd edition. It's over 100 pages, and we've distributed this over 11,000 times in classrooms all around the country. We believe that change can start in the classroom. And that's why I'm really excited to join and give a little bit more of that Gen Z perspective, that Gen Z energy, where we know business as usual no longer works, and we must look at linear things and explore how we can make them circular. Thank you.
Thanks to Melati for outlining how solutions can put together environmental considerations and also social, which is a great thing when this can happen. So thanks a lot to all of you. I think we learned a lot about very specific, concrete things that you all brought into the table. How can we implement change, really, by demonstrating things that have actually happened on the ground. So thanks a lot for that. Now, though, I have a few questions. The first one is for you, Paul, and it's a tricky one. So, yeah. You've gone through these reflections about greening the feedstock, and you have, of course, summarized that into 3 points. But do you have any other tips that other organizations that are here in the room can do to transition to a more a solutions model for plastic that is more upstream?
Sure. I think it touches really on the second point of the innovation and sustainability going hand in hand to drive systemic change. We have an R&D team within our segment who have been working in the last number of years to really decomplexify and strip out some of the complexities of historic legacy multi-layer plastics. There are a lot of plastic flexibles out there that I've worked with 9 and 12 layers across print webs, barrier webs, tie layers, but really looking to simplify the structure and increase the majority of one particular material, a mono-material, above a threshold of 90 or 95%. And what that does is that it has a further impact upstream because it harmonizes and simplifies what's being collected, what's going into a MRF, and it then drives value so that people who are running the MRFs, the waste management companies, there's a value equation that has to be achieved. And if we can put less complex, less of the legacy, really complicated, flexible structures into the market, then we see that as an opportunity. And our Blue Loop sustainability family that I mentioned as well has very high monomaterial content. So if you're here today thinking, what would be a first step if today I have to use virgin fossil feedstock? Review your portfolio and speak to your customers and look at where you can decomplexify and put simpler materials into your structures.
Thanks a lot. Simpler materials is key. I can summarize that by saying also design is key, which reminds me also something that Tobias put on the screen, that up to 80% of the impacts are decided when we're designing things, when we're thinking. So take a moment and pause and think about how you do stuff, yeah?
Absolutely.
Less material, less complexity is important. Thanks for that. Ida, over to you. You took us through the reuse thinking of Camupac, and you've been already doing a few things around that. What are some things that you've learned that you really wished you'd known earlier?
Well, good question, thank you. I think there's two criteria I wish I would have known. One of them is that maybe I would have liked to know how long and how challenging the road is going to be as the first forerunner changing consumer behavior and changing behavior in a way. But then again, I also think that if I had known that, had I taken this road, probably not. And now we're here and we have done a long road and been driving the market. So I'm not sure if I would actually like to know that. But then another case, when we started Camupac, we thought we always wanted to make sure that the model we're building is sustainable and efficient. So we started process first. We thought that when designing the system and packaging and everything. But in the end, on the way, we figured out that customer experience and consumer experience is the crucial key for scaling reusable systems. So then we changed that as our core, and we felt like that was the changing moment when things started to click in. Because at this point, I still feel like as soon as we get the volumes up and the users in, then the sustainability will come, and then it's time for processes and the system to be efficient. So I guess that would be my advice to someone designing something similar.
Thanks. So consumers should be in focus, or the final users, let's say, yeah? So it's important to think, not forget about how they react to changes we make, yeah?
Yeah, and customers also.
Of course. Thanks a lot. Manon, I have also a question for you, of course, yeah? You've been telling us about your collaboration a lot, right? And I was just curious to understand what in that journey of securing collaboration, what did you find most helpful? Which resources would you encourage?
Thank you, Jonas. Yes, there's a lot of resources out there to support corporate into shifting from linear to circular models, but also consumers and stakeholders interested in the field of reuse. Raisin mentioned the reuse portal. I would advise that any stakeholder or people in this room interested in the topic creates a profile. Same on Planet Reuse. Planet Reuse is a free platform. It's online, so it's quite easy to connect with all of the stakeholders on it. There's more than 600 members. It's a steadily growing database of organizations. There's a lot of reports and resources on it. There's also the interest of building capacity through webinars, hopefully in the future through learning expeditions and excursions. So I think this gives a lot of resources to hope for. And the new era reuse campaign that I also mentioned being live next week will, on New Era's website, have a lot of resources, sectoral fact sheets on the topic of reuse, proving how beneficial these models are from a lot of different perspectives, environmental and economic being some of them. So this is also some resources that you can go and have a look for yourself. And finally, for companies or stakeholders that have very specific challenges and need tailor-made advice, Enough Plastic is also a company that you can reach out to, so don't hesitate to reach out to me for any questions.
Thank you. I'm sure a lot will take you up on the offer, but thanks a lot for reassuring us that help is available for those in need, yeah? Thanks a lot for that. Melati, you gave us a really lively talk, so thanks for that, yeah. And I could see that you're driven by hope, but can you tell us what gives you hope? What makes you optimistic about the future? About, fixing plastic problems upstream, yeah?
Yeah, there's a lot, and I think I'm really privileged to be coming from a place where my source is hope and my source is love. Growing up on the island of Bali, it's hard not to fall in love with the natural world. A show of hands, how many of you have actually been to Bali before? Okay, so I have some people that have been to Bali before, some who don't, who've never been to Bali. But really the nature there was what drove me and my sister to take that first step. And today, largely I could answer the question of what gives me hope, the generation I'm a part of, seeing young people everywhere taking action and leading by example, not waiting until they're older to start taking action. But I think for me as well, what gives me hope is seeing action. And not only by grassroots efforts or from the young generation, but seeing leaders, CEOs, general managers, politicians lead with action. I think this is something that so many of us want, and I know that this is where the Gen Z panels and sessions like this are more here for the inspiration, but what gives us hope and what we are here for is to really see that guidance of action being implemented. So this is actually like similarly to a resource that we heard before. Youthtopia, the organization that I started now, has a program where we work together with the corporate world, the private sector, in a reverse mentorship where a lot of the questions and CEOs who are asking where do we start in our sustainability get paired with young people and have that reverse mentorship and that honest, open dialogue that helps them accelerate their sustainability journey. And this dialogue, this intergenerational change is so important. Those conversations, those interactions is what gives me hope, because I see where one generation feels stuck or overwhelmed or clueless on where and how to start, looking at sustainability as a sacrifice for their numbers or the business as usual. And another generation knows that if we don't do this, you won't have a license to operate in the future. It's as simple as that. That interaction is like, for me, that's where I see a lot of the hope. It's where I get a lot of the motivation to keep going, because I know in those discussions, change and action will happen. So reach out if you want to have a chat with me and continue on that program.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for that. It's really cool to see that you also spoke about collaboration. Yeah, there's a lot of different stakeholders involved in plastics, apparently, in many different ways. So working together is key, and that's something I would definitely not forget from this session. And with that, we're approaching the end. We took you through a journey where it started with some scene setting, keynote speeches about broad issues on plastics, and then we have some really, really specific examples on what's happening, and that's quite encouraging to see that things are actually happening on the ground. So thanks a lot for being here today. I hope you learned a lot, you enjoyed the session, and see you around in the break. Thank you.